Okay, we're going to get going here and if there's more people that's going to come in, we'll let them walk in, but we're going to run out of time. We've got a full agenda for you this morning. We appreciate everybody showing up early in the morning after breakfast. We are not going to spend a lot of time on PowerPoint, but before we get going, I do want to just get a show of hands. How many people are familiar with K2? It'll help me to... Okay, that's good. So I'm not going to spend too much time on the fact that we come from a workflow and a BPM heritage. It's still very much part of our DNA and what we do on a day-to-day basis, but we are constantly evolving the platform, aligning with new opportunities from Microsoft as well as some of our own innovation. And today is an important day for us because it's one of the first times that we are going to show some of the new stuff with a very strong focus around the innovative opportunities that we have around SharePoint 2013. K2 and the solution that we're building for SharePoint 2013 really focuses on allowing you to rapidly build workflow-based and forms-based business applications that you can use throughout your enterprise. We have a very rich platform that allows you to build business forms. You're going to see a lot of that today. We recently launched this called Smart Forms, and we're going to show to you this morning how we build a smart form that runs very seamlessly within SharePoint and SharePoint 2013, and how that form can include information from other line of business systems and evolve so that the business logic that you have within your organization is represented and captured on those forms. And then how we make those forms available across your mobile devices and throughout your enterprise so you can use them and allow people to do and make the right decisions, do the right work at the right point in time. K2's workflow BPM heritage is very strong. We're not going to spend a lot of time on building out workflow and business processes this morning. You can still use K2 to pretty much automate every single process that you can think of within SharePoint, from the most simple approval process all the way through to the most complex business process and business process automation solution that you want to build. Seamlessly integrate into SharePoint, but also span beyond it to talk to other systems within your organization, such as SAP, Salesforce.com, MS CRM, and all the cloud services that are available today. We build on a concept, those of you familiar with K2 will know, Smart Objects. Smart Objects is a layer that we have within K2. We've had for many years a lot of innovation work that's gone into it that allow you to take information and turn that into, or unstructured data and turn it into logical information, really allowing less technical people to quickly get an ROI out of information within their organization. Use it on forms, use it in reports, use it in your workflows, use it in the decision-making process. And it's essentially the underpinning of what Willif is going to show us today is all of the information that we're going to be using is coming to us from Smart Objects. It's a very rich platform, very mature, and some of the biggest enterprises in the world is using that as their underpinning for building their data-driven business applications today. And then finally, reports, insight, information. How do we allow people to make better decisions at the right time? And you'll see how we incorporate that in this solution. Ultimately, taking that, making it available across the vast amount of cloud services today, the solution that you are going to see today works seamlessly against SharePoint 365, as well as SharePoint on-premise, as well as against your SharePoint 2010 environment. So you can combine all of those assets, you can build rich applications, you can build forms, you can build workflows, processes, reports, and seamlessly integrate them across all of those and run them in those environments. And we're pretty excited about the work that we've done there to make that possible. Of course, it extends onto your mobile devices. We already have mobile clients for most of the platforms out there, including iOS, BlackBerry, and Android. And we're going to extend that into Windows 8 and Windows Phone 8 soon. But it essentially allows you to take these forms-based applications, whether there are workflows associated with it or not, and put it in the pockets of your people and really empower them to do the right things at the right time. We talked about cloud services, and we talked about extending this throughout the enterprise and making it available. I'm going to stop there. That's about as much time as we want to spend on PowerPoint this morning before I'm going to hand over to Willif. And he's going to show you what it is that we've been doing. I think it's going to be much more interesting for you to experience this, to gain insight into what K2 is doing, and how we see SharePoint 2013 drive a new wave of innovation around building business applications within organizations combined with K2. Willif?
Thanks for that, Adrian. I'm going to switch across to my VPC. Right, so I'm going to keep today's demo very, very practical, very hands-on. Here I am in SharePoint 2013, and I have a couple of lists that I've created beforehand. I have this employee list. The scenario I'd like to build is an employee onboarding application, which we'll build this morning. So I've got a list inside SharePoint, a couple of columns. In addition to that, I also have a secondary list, which is a city list, which I have a couple of cities captured, which I'm going to use as a lookup within my primary list. So now that I have these artifacts in SharePoint, I'd like to start building my K2 application. So when I go to the list settings, you can see we have a K2 applications menu. And when I click on that, I have a choice of the type of application we'd like to build. Do I just only want to interact with the data in SharePoint? In other words, I'll get some smart objects. Do I want a couple of forms? Or am I going to go for the whole complete solution of forms, smart objects, and workflow? So in this case, of course, I'd like to demonstrate all three to you. So we're going to build a workflow-centric application. And the additional question I need to specify is, now that we have this data objects which have been generated for me and these forms, how do I want to start the workflow? There are a couple of choices there. Firstly, I can do this via the form. In other words, when I either capture something or edit something, I can kick off a workflow. Or I can make it event-driven, so I can select one or more events inside SharePoint, and as many as I like. Or I can kick this off manually. You might have a list item or a document in a document library, and once everybody's finished working on it, you can hit start the workflow, and off you go. In this case, I'm going to hook it into a form. So you can see here I've got three choices, the new, the edit, and the display. I'm going to use the new employee form. And when I click next, that's going to drop me into our workflow designer. So that'll allow me now to build out this employee onboarding workflow. This is a Silverlight-based component. And there it comes. Right, so I'm going to give my workflow a name. Let's call that employee onboarding. And within this context browser, I have access to everything on my form. So now we've generated a smart form now for this list. It's the new employee form. And I have a bunch of controls on there which I can use directly within this workflow. So I can say, right, to identify this workflow, I think I'm going to use some of my controls. So I can grab these fields directly off the form, use them in the workflow if I want to. Just one of many ways that we can bring this data together. I'm going to create some data fields which we'll be using later on in the demo. And here I can see, as we specified earlier, the form is going to start the workflow. Here are the rules for that form. So when I click on a button on the form, it's going to save the new employee. Then it will start the workflow and then redirect me back to the list. Right, so I'm pretty happy with that. When I click Finish, it drops me into the workflow designer, and now I can actually start assembling the workflow itself. As Adrian mentioned earlier, we have a strong history in workflow, and the purpose of today's session is not to focus too strongly on workflow. So I'm going to spend most of this focusing on some of the more human elements and bringing people and this data together. Right, so the first thing we'll do now is send this to a manager for approval. So I can just drag a user task, drop this on the canvas, and call this manager approval, and specify what actions can this manager take when this work item gets to them. So I can say approved and declined. And you can see that's going to create new workflow outcomes for me, which means when they approve, there'll be a new branch in the workflow. I'm going to send, you can see by default, we send the edit employee form to the user. So we have those three forms which we've generated for the list, the new, the edit, and the display. And this is under the assumption that the user will change something on that form. If we want them not to be able to change, we can just pick the display employee form, in which case they'll have a read-only view. And they can, of course, go ahead and customize that further. Right, you can see once again, because this is wired into a smart form, we're going to open up this work item on one of the rules on our form. And lastly, I must allocate this task to a user. I'm just going to send this to the originator, which is easier for this demo. Right, and when I click Finish, I have my manager approval step, and I've got two new drop zones for the remainder of the workflow. So as you saw in the beginning, this is against an employee list. So we're going to hook this into the new employee form. And once I've done that, I want to be able to do something with this list item within my workflow. So if I switch to my SharePoint 2013 list wizards, you can see here I can do anything I want to that list item. In this case, I'd like to update the list item. But when I drag and drop that, you'll see a new concept in K2, which we call item references. The workflow designer knows that it's being built around the context of a list item, and that means at some point in time, you probably want to interact with that list item. But you don't want to have to specify this item with this ID in this list. You shouldn't have to care about that. The workflow designer knows exactly what the context is, and therefore it's brought back, or it's created an item reference to my employee list, and I can interact with this list item directly from within this canvas. You can see here all of my fields are available that were on that list. And right at the end here, I'm just going to go ahead and update the status to be approved. Right, so that's on the approval side. On the decline side, let's say, well, we don't actually want that new employee anymore, so we'll just go ahead and delete that list item. once again with the employee reference, and there we're done. So in a couple of steps, I'm just going to go ahead and deploy this workflow. Just a couple of drag and drop steps. We've generated a smart object for this list. We have an associated smart object for the city lookup, which I'll show you later. We've generated some forms, and we've now gone and designed a workflow all within the browser. Right, and when I've finished, I'm going to go ahead and close this workflow designer and head back to my list. Right, so here we are back in our employee list. If I now was to click New Employee, instead of seeing the default SharePoint form for this list item, you now see an embedded K2 Smart form. Now this is pretty significant because even though the form now is pretty basic and anybody can build a custom form and drop it against the list, with the Smart Forms platform, we can now make this form much richer, and we can visually go and edit this form within the browser directly from within this environment. So this form is pretty vanilla right now. I'd like to bring in some more line of business data. Because this is an employee onboarding scenario, I'll be employing new salespeople. I want to see some of my accounts in the different regions that I'll be employing these individuals in. Therefore, I'd like to bring some of my MSCRM line of business data directly into this solution. So when I click K2 application again against this list, there you can see all the artifacts that have been created for this list. Our 2 smart objects, the 3 forms, 3 views. Now with smart forms, views are the building blocks of forms. These are reusable components. And lastly, the workflow. So I'd like to take our new employee form and make some changes. So I'm going to simply check it out and edit it. And you can see here that our design environment opens directly from here, and we can make changes to this form. Here it comes. So there's my new employee form. This is the new employee view on the left here, and I can go and change this view or add some things to that. So I'm going to bring in some of my line of business data here. I've previously generated some smart objects and some views for my CRM 2011 data, and I'm just going to go and grab my account view and drop that onto this form directly from within the canvas. All right, and let's go and specify the size. Oops. And what I'd like to do now is change the behavior of this form such that when I start selecting the city of the new employee, that we filter down my CRM data to just show the relevant accounts from that city. And that can be done by adding a new rule to this form. You can see here a couple of rules have been generated for me. I'm going to go add a new rule to this. So when I click Add a Rule, our Rules Designer opens up here as well, and I can go and select one of my templates. Now in this case, I'm going to hook this into the city drop-down on my form. So I'm going to say when a control on the view raises an event. And you can see here that the template drops me a rule in the bottom in sort of plain English. First, it wants to know, well, which view? This is on our new employee view. Which control? Well, I want this on the city drop-down list. And what must happen to it? Well, the moment it gets changed, I'd like something to happen on my form. All right, so now we're going to tell the other view to go and reload itself with a filtered list. So we're going to do an execute a view method on our CRM accounts view. And instead of bringing back everything, I'd like to filter that. So I'm going to bring back my filter screen so I can go and do some mappings. And I'm going to expand my controls all the way down to that city dropdown. Now I mentioned in the start that city is actually a lookup to another list, and therefore now we have actually generated an additional smart object with all of the columns from that other list available for me to use. So I'm simply going to go ahead and grab the title from that other list, drag and drop that across, and use that to go and filter this list. Very, very simple. And I can click Finish. And save. Right, so I've done that all within the browser. We've now brought in a second view with some line of business data directly into the same form. I'd like to take this a level further. Let's also bring some workflow history data into this as well. If I'm going to employ and do some HR processes, I might have additional processes with some historic data that I'd like to report on. So let me show you what it's like to build a brand new view from within this environment. I'm just going to say New View, opens up the View Wizard. I'm going to call that Reports. And now I'm in this drag and drop environment that I can use to go and build these particular views. If I scroll down here with all my controls, all the usual suspects are here for your simple controls. I'm interested in something that's a little richer, such as these reporting controls, and I'll just drag and drop those onto my canvas. So we'll have our workflow instances. and our activity instances. An activity is a single step within that workflow. Fantastic. I'm also going to build one more rule such that when I select the workflow on my workflow instances control, that it goes and refreshes the activity instances control to only show data for that one specific control. So let's grab a template. When a controller on the view raises an event, in this case it's the workflow instances control. And when I click on that, I would like to transfer the data from that control across to the other control to filter it. So that's a simple action. And once again, I just have to bind these two together, take the workflow instances value, send it across to activity instances, and we're done. Right, so let me save that. So we've very quickly gone and enhanced this form, but what does it look like? Well, let's go and take a look. If I now click on new item for employee, you can see now that this form is suddenly a lot richer. I've got my new employee section on the left. Here's my CRM accounts on the right. At this point in time, they are unfiltered. It's just showing me everybody. Oh, and I forgot to add my view to my form. Well, let me go and do that quickly. So I'll go back to my designer. I'm going to go and edit my new employee form and take that reports view which we just built and drag and drop it onto this form. Oops, I'm going the wrong way here. Let's go to SharePoint. And there it is. There's our reports view. To assemble these is simple drag and drop, and I can go ahead and give this a title. Let's call this employee history. And save that. Alrighty, I'm going to head back to my list, hit new item, and there you can see now we have these two views, and at the bottom we have our employee history. At this point we only have HR policy workflows. When I select that, I can see all of the history of those workflow instances. As we go on throughout this demo, though, of course, we'll be creating a lot more data. So let's capture our first employee. So I'll call this East Region Sales, the infamous Mr. John Smith. And let's say he'll be starting from us in early December. Notice how we detect all of the data types, of course, and bring or show the relevant controls automatically. So let's see he's based out of New York. The moment I select that rule fires and the CRM data on the right is being filtered for me. I'm going to assign him a manager. Well, in this case, it's going to be Bob. This is a people or group control, so we use our picker control to be able to look up to make sure this is valid data. And the salary is currency, so we also format that appropriately as well. I'll just say his status is new. And when I hit save, we're going to create the list item in the list and kick off the workflow. So here we have our list item, Mr. John Smith for East Region Sales. And when we start the workflow, it's now going to go and flow to that manager approval step, and we need someone to action that. Now, there are a number of ways that we can deliver work to users in K2. A popular way via the browser is just via the work list. And I have a work list part directly here within inside SharePoint. And I can simply go ahead and click on that item, and that's going to open up this manager approval task for me. You can see in the lowest portion of the form, we have the edit employee view. And in the upper portion, we've injected a workflow view because this form now is running in the context of workflow. So we have all of our SharePoint data as well as our workflow context within the same form. Right, so I'm actually going to leave this item open for here because this is great for if the manager is currently available and in office and can action this item directly from within his browser. But what if the user is completely offline? He's somewhere out in the field, doesn't have access to the internet, but he has his mobile device with him. How do we empower him to be able to still work on these work items even though he's not actually online at this point in time? So I'd actually like to take that form, mail it out to the user, let him approve from his mobile device, but with context of the form so he can make an informed decision. So I'm going to go back to my employee list and start enhancing this form a little further. So the first thing I'm going to do is edit our new employee view. And what I want to do is I want to take this entire form and save it as a PDF so that when I start the workflow, I have context to this form and can access that from anywhere. So here we have a save as PDF control, which I can simply drop onto the canvas and save. Right, so now that we have that control on the canvas, I'm going to edit my form. and tweak one of the rules to actually go and specify exactly when must that PDF snapshot be taken. Well, the best place is just before we start the workflow, because at that point in time, everyone has filled in the form and the workflow is about to begin. So I'm going to go and edit this rule for the Save button. You can see it does a couple of things today. That it calls the Save method on the smart object, then it starts the workflow, navigates to a new URL. Well, let's first tell that, that control to go and take a snapshot. So I'm going to send the value across to that control, and that's going to go and take a snapshot PDF of that entire form. Of course, I want that to happen before we start the workflow, so I need to move this up. These all fire in the order that they appear. There we go. So we'll save, take a snapshot, start the workflow. Once you've taken a snapshot, though, I need a handle to exactly what the ID is of this new snapshot, because, of course, you could be taking snapshots of forms all the time, and send that into the workflow. So I'm going to once again go to my PDF control and say, we'll take your value now and send that into that form ID field that we created earlier. And save. Right, so now we're taking the snapshot, but now we have to go to the workflow and do something with it. So I'm going to go back to my employee onboarding workflow and go and edit this workflow to do something with this snapshot that we have. So I'm going to go to this manager approval step and edit that. And over here at this page where I allocate the participants, I'm going to say, let's notify those participants when they have work. And that adds a new page to the wizard where I can customize what that looks like. So I'm going to go and change the subject and call this employee approval. And once again, from our item references, I can make use of any data that I want to from within this item. So let's just say this is an employee approval for last name. And also within the email, I can say, needs your approval. And let's just go and stick some of his data in here as well. And we can use this absolutely anyway. There we go, something like that. So pretty basic. You can send the user an email saying, hey, we need your interaction here for this specific item. But we also want to use that PDF. So I'm actually going to expand this wizard and make use of the attachment. So let's go and attach that to this form. Now, as you'll recall, everything in K2 is done by smart objects. So similarly, for this PDF control, it saves all of its values into a smart object as well. So I just need to go and retrieve the appropriate PDF. So I'll go and drag that PDF property across. It wants to know, well, which one? Well, that's simple. That's the one that we sent into the form ID earlier. And finish. Right, so let me go ahead and deploy my workflow one more time. This will deploy a new version of the workflow. So as you can see, very quick within this environment to enhance the solution. We made some tweaks to the form, we made some tweaks to the workflow, and now I'm going to go and start a new instance of this workflow to show you what that looks like. So let's quit back out of the designer and head back to our list. There we are. And capture a new item. So this will be for, let's say, West Inside Sales, Mr. Peter Jones, and let's say he's joining us later in this month. And I'll say he's based out of Seattle. Once again, data filters out pretty nicely. His manager is going to be Brandon, and he is also new. You see at the bottom here, we now have more workflow data than we had previously. We had our HR policy data, but we also have our employee onboarding, which is currently sitting on manager approval. So this is all live and updating all the time. Right, so that's what I'm going to capture him as. Hit save. It's going to do the same as before. Save the list item and start the workflow. Now, ordinarily, the user would access his work from the work list. And there you can see the work item is, but he's offline right now. So he might be working on his mobile device, or in this case, I'll show it to you via Outlook. And then I get a new notification saying there's a new employee approval for Jones. You can see here he's called Peter Jones. And I can action this work item directly from my email client. In addition, there's our PDF. You can go and double click that. You can see there's the entire form, the snapshot of it that we took with all the details captured at that point in time, mail it out to the user. So now he can make an informed decision. He has the entire form with him. He can see if he wants to approve or decline. He says, yep, this all looks great. I'm going to simply reply to my mail and say, yep, I like that. approved. So very easy from the mobile device, can simply interact with these work items, no problems whatsoever. This usually takes a couple of seconds because I've set the thing to check every 30 seconds, so worst case, that's how long we're going to have to wait. But there we go. So the work item has been completed. You've successfully completed the manager approval event with the approved action. So K2 server is telling us, yep, I understand exactly what you wanted. This work is actioned. Great. So now let's get back to our previous original guide that we were approving, this work item we left open earlier. Now I want to show you how I can actually take a solution that's in flight and make enhancements and changes to this form without having to take this whole solution offline. Because these forms are not compiled and built, these are declarative forms built on top of the declarative data layer, we can change these forms on the fly very, very easily. So I'd like to bring some more data into this. So let me go back to my list and go and edit my forms. So I'd like to bring some more workflow context into this form. So let's go to our edit employee form, which is the one that we have open over there, and edit this form. Now in K2 we have a graphical component that's called view flow, which allows you to see a real-time graphical snapshot of where this workflow is at the moment. I'd like to incorporate that into the same work item so that the user has some context as to why this thing landed on his desk and he needs to approve this now. So let's add some tabs to the form. So I'll add a second tab, which I'm going to call my view flow tab. And I can simply grab my view flow view and drop that onto the form. Here it is in my workflow section. Drag and drop that on. There it is. And then I'm going to edit one more of the rules. When we open up this work item, we want to, of course, open the view flow for the appropriate work item. So let's go and edit this rule and just wire that in. So here's the rule where we open up the work item. I'm going to grab that view flow URL that we created earlier and simply send that to this content control on my view flow view. Drag and drop. And save. Right, so there I've edited the form. I'm going to switch directly back to this manager approval task and simply refresh. You can see immediately we have tabs on our form now. I have this view flow tab. When I switch to that tab, there's the real-time snapshot of where we are. We're currently sitting at manager approval, waiting for me to do something. If I switch to the charts, I can get a pie chart view of where we are. You can see it's been sitting at manager approval for 9 minutes and 48 seconds. That's about as long as it's taken me to explain this to you. And I think I'm going to go ahead now and action this item. So let's go back to our form. Yep, that all looks great. And in this case, I'm going to decline the user and submit. I'm also very quickly going to switch back to view flow. This component updates in real time. So I'm going to leave it here for a couple of seconds. And you'll see, there we go. It's updated. I chose the decline action, so you can see the approved route is in red. We didn't follow that path. We went down declined and went to delete this item. Similarly, our charts have updated. You can see we have a couple of very quick steps here at the end. And lastly, if I head back to my list, you can see Mr. John Smith has now been deleted, which is what that last step was in the workflow. Right, so in a real short time now, we've built a solution, made it much richer, brought in line of business data, brought in workflow data, and edited this view all from within SharePoint. But what if I want to use this application outside of the context of SharePoint? Am I bound to SharePoint? Well, I can actually run these within my own application if I want to. Here's the K2 Designer site running standalone. This is the site we use to build these particular forms with, if you want to just build straight up forms and views and workflows. And I can go to my new employee form. There it is. And run that completely standalone. Or I can reuse that within my own application if I want to. You can see here by default this one has still been themed to look like SharePoint. We've got the SharePoint style Segoe UI font. But if I don't like that, I can change that, no problem. Let's just go and pick another theme that might fit in a little better with my own application. So something very straightforward. It's all declarative. Nothing is hard-coded into the form. It's very easy to do that. Right, so that was pretty whirlwind, but that was a quick lap around what K2 is doing around SharePoint. I see we have a question over there, Adrian.
So a lot of you are familiar with K2, and you'll know that there's a lot more that you can do with the platform. We went through this very quickly. We wanted to show you a lot about what's new. Well, I've showed you how we build business forms, include data from multiple data sources. We can read and write to all of those data sources. We did a number of things around SharePoint where we now take all of the artifacts that pertains to a specific list or a specific document library or a specific item where you built your solution, and we consolidate all of that for you in one place so you can easily work and enhance those items right there in one place. Also doing a lot of work to extend it out beyond onto the edge devices and people's pockets, and doing that in an incredibly short period of time. What we did here, which is a solution that if you deploy it into production environment, is robust enough to actually work within the enterprise, used to take weeks, if not months. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring that down to allow customers to deploy a multitude of these solutions within their organizations very rapidly, and that's how we see ROI. It's very rare for us to have customers that implement one or two solutions. Surely when they start, that's where they start, but we have customers where the solutions are up in the multitudes of hundreds, 500, 600, 700 form-based applications that's being deployed on top of this technology in a very short period of time, and that's how you get our ROI out of your application. We have two of those customers here today. They're going to very quickly take some time to share their stories with you, to tell you how they've used K2, how they're being successful, and then we're going to open it up for questions, and then you're welcome to ask them questions as well as me and Olaf. And we have a lot of our K2 crew here today. They're also at the booth. You're welcome to come and talk to them there. We have a lot of our engineers who's building the software actually at the event, and they would love some first-hand feedback and get to understand what is it that you want from us and what is it that we can do better. And then, of course, we have a handout right at the end of the session as well. But I'm sure you guys aren't waiting for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to hand over Prabhakar. If you're going to talk to us, he's from SanDisk. SanDisk is a fantastic customer of ours. I'll let him talk about, give you the background on the company itself, as well as what they're doing on our platform. And then we go to Brian from C Corp. And after that, we'll wrap it up with some Q&A.
Excellent. Good morning, everyone. This is Prabhakar. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with SanDisk. If not, there's nothing we are giving away today. Okay. So we have been a K2 customer for a very long time. I don't even recollect, probably about 8-9 years. But about 3 years ago, we got into this a big application building, which is truly about pricing. As you know, SanDisk, we operate our business around OEM and retail primarily, about $3 billion on the OEM side. I mean, most of these devices, like iPhones, BlackBerry, everything, we have about probably 50% market share in those devices, just around flash memory, right? And then on the retail stores, if you go to Best Buy or Walmart, or if you're from Europe, Tesco or MediaMart, I mean, we sell our products, right? So there's a lot of this revenue that we generate now actually goes through the K2 tool, right? I mean, that's what we have done in terms of pricing. To imagine that every store, every organization that we deal with needs a pricing on a constant basis, and pricing is very, very sensitive. And as you know, the pricing decline, if some of you have noticed, what 128 MB used to cost 10 years ago, you can get 128 GB today. It's the same price, right, from MB to GB. So really, I mean, every month there's a price decline, price fluctuation. So everything goes through the K2 tool that we have today. And we operate globally, as I said, all the regions, and we have about 50,000 requests that we have used K2 to generate all these workflow tools. And as you can imagine, all the pricing sensitivity directly impacts our bottom line. I mean, it's not a workflow tool for employee onboarding. It's really, hey, can we sell this at 47 cents, or can we sell it at 52 cents? What's the difference, right? So, and based on the volume, you have to be very sensitive who needs to approve all of this, right? And we have really empowered the right people in the organization. I mean, previously we had a different story, but then with K2, we were able to really empower the right people in the organization, right? So this is what I was referring to before and after K2. K2 is an integral to the larger application that we have built, but it really drives the entire workflow. And it's still not as cool but it is still very cool. I wish I could demo the application to you, and it exactly works the way you saw the demo. I mean, the email notification, mobile device notification, everything goes. Our very, very senior executives, right up to the people who report to the C-level, they actually use this tool on their mobile devices, on their iPads, and on email client and everything to approve the prices. And they have more information available by hyperlinking into the system. But if they really know, what they need to know is the price and who the customer is, and then they can go ahead and approve some of these things, right? So what used to take 4 days, it's real. It used to take, it now takes 1 day, because now we have empowered the right people, right? Previously, an admin has to create a spreadsheet with a PowerPoint, this is what we are planning to do, and by the time, the market conditions change, and, there's always back and forth, right? And what used to be, as I said, admin work has now gone into the people who, as we call RSMs, regional sales managers. These are the guys who deal with Best Buys of the world. They actually use the tool now. Previously, they used to pick up the phone and call the admin, I need the pricing approval for Best Buy today. Can you get it done? Instead of that, now they actually go online and make this price request, right? And there's a lot of, as you can imagine, there's a lot of email back and forth. I spoke to the customer is not willing to do this. Can you make the change for me? By then, the admin has gone home, so the next day comes in. That's why it used to take days to get some of these pricing approvals, and customers were getting very, very frustrated. And as you can imagine, the people are always tied to their laptop, and they need to work through the laptops and all of that. So now it's completely mobile, right? And the decision making is with the right people, and it's faster decision, right? And previously there were multiples of systems, and as you can imagine, PowerPoints, Excel, Outlook, and ultimately this all has to enter into our transactional system. That's where we have all the revenue recognition is done. But now with the K2 implementation, we were able to push all of this in a completely automated fashion into the right systems. And I mean, this is all what we saw today is going to give us a lot of drive towards moving to some of these nice features when we start integrating with Microsoft Dynamics. We have been implementing Microsoft Dynamics for about a year now, and we'll be sharing some of our experiences at Convergence later next year. We have one of the bigger implementations of Microsoft CRM, and we are planning to integrate heavily with K2. And SharePoint 2013 is one of the things that we would like to implement, because we have been SharePoint customer for maybe about a decade plus. I don't know, we were in release 1 onwards, and it's been about 18 months that we are on 2010, and we do see business reasons why we would like to move to 2013, and we'll be integrating K2 heavily with that, right? And ultimately, what we are looking at, the bottom line impact, how do we drive the revenue? How do we automate some of these tools directly giving into the hands of the people that need to run the business, right? And I'll share one good experience that, we are a global company, and we have large presence everywhere, primarily in Israel and India. And I was in Israel, and one of the guy came to me and said, hey, are you going to patent this? I mean, this is so cool. I mean, you guys have done so much. Can you patent? I said, no, we just bought the tool from a company. We can't patent this, right? So, all right. So that's, yeah.
Howdy. I've realized this week that I work for C Corp. We're a military subcontractor. There's about 400 of us. I work in IT. I'm a schlub, essentially. I've realized how poor we are as far as what we spend on IT. We're running a SharePoint Foundation site, and every dime we spend in IT is really, really well thought out, and really, really, that's why we're doing it. And let me tell you a little about our company first. We essentially, anything that doesn't have to do with the propulsion system of a submarine, our engineers and employees are out there working on it. We have a launchers group that does foreign military sales. We invented a thing with takes car airbag launchers, factory airbag launchers, and a essentially puts them in a big metal tube and sticks a modern torpedo in there, and you can bolt it onto any ship in the world, and it shoots out modern torpedoes. So we sell that to like the Australian Navy and that sort of stuff. On top of our research building, we have just a huge array of antennas, and we do stuff with solid-state C programming and radio signals and that sort of stuff. We have just plain old, paper pushers that do asset management for the Navy as well. About half our employees go to work every day on the sub base. We never see them. So because of that, we ended up, over the last couple of years, we've really leveraged SharePoint. It's great because the Navy runs their own firewall and really don't care what works for us. And so, being able to run it through HTTPS and having people get into SharePoint has made it fantastic for us, because whether somebody's on a base or they're in Guam or wherever they are, our employees have access to SharePoint. So because of that, it's grown ridiculously fast. So once we rolled out SharePoint 2010, I think our 2003 site maybe had a couple hundred meg in it, and we're running 35 gigs and growing by the week. So that's why we got into SharePoint. And the problem is I'm not really a .NET developer. I'm an IT guy. And we do have .NET developers, but they're all very busy and don't really come build applications for business things. So I spent a lot of time essentially saying no to people. One of the ones I'm going to talk about. I literally a year ago had to tell somebody no, and they wanted a whole credit card thing that So I'm not going to go very deep into why we bought K2 and the whole research process and what led us to it and why it made so much sense to us. I'd happily talk with anybody who wants to after this, but what I really wanted to do was take some time and tell you about some of the stuff that we're doing and why I find it so cool. So, yeah, I'm going to basically skip this slide, sorry. No, that's the slide I'm keeping. Sorry. So, the very first workflow I wrote was one of our managers came to us and said, hey, the SharePoint thing, that's cool. Thank you, sir, And he basically wanted us we have to report to the government what every single individual employee does. So we charge the government, X amount of dollars for 40 hours of work on this guy, and this guy did 180 because he was on a sub doing testing. Essentially, you have to write a report that says what each of those people did every month as we bill the government. So basically, he came to me and said, hey, the reporting requirements are changing. We're going to every 2 weeks, but I don't want to hire another person to do that report, so I need you to make it be better. So, her name's Jen. Go talk to her, figure it out, and make Jen's life better. So, being a SharePoint guy, I came up with a SharePoint solution. So essentially, it's all they really needed was a list in SharePoint, and they just go in, hit Add New, and they put in a giant text field, and they paste, and so it'll work from the base. It has to be in plain text. Hit Save, and it goes into a SharePoint list. So the really neat thing with K2, and that was cool. I mean, that made her life really easy, because she was getting emails and just disparate emails and pasting them all together, and some people wouldn't email her, and it was a mess. And so the things that K2 then on top of that I was able to do myself was I now go in, and every time somebody submits it, I change the permissions immediately. I give permission to change it to their manager, they get permissions, and then I actually go out and figure out who their customer is in our Oracle database and give their customer from the outside permission, but only every 2 weeks, so that they don't see it in real time. So our government contractors can now come in and see that report themselves. So Jen literally only every 2 weeks has to review it, make that available to them, and that's it. So we took her job from, she was doing something insane, like 70% of her job was writing this one report, to it's literally like a minute. And she just hits a button and it goes through. So it was just kind of SharePoint and that whole how to dynamically assign permissions and come over here and pull this. I'm sure there's people at this conference that know how to do that in .NET and are really cool programmers, but I wasn't one of them. But in a workflow, it took me, 3 hours to figure out, and it's done. So that's was my very first K2 thing I ever did. That credit card form I mentioned, what he wanted to do was basically have a communal workspace where people could come in and look at a credit card order form. And then, you know, like Excel, when you change one field and you see the prices change over here, and he wanted it to kind of work that way. And then other people from his business area could come in and they could look at it and they could kind of all bat it around and come up with a pricing model and this whole thing. Well, that whole, you know, you change this field and then the total changes, I didn't know how to do that on the new item form in SharePoint. You know, I know enough about Designer. I can get in there and do like, you know, custom new and move some stuff around, but it just wasn't in my skill set there, again, to build a .NET form that tied into SharePoint that did all this. Once Smart Forms came out, it took me an hour. I just went, figured out a couple things. You know, there's stuff in the K2 stuff that I've done it enough now. I use stuff all the time that I've never used before, but it's all called what I think it should be. You know, so I was like, oh, operator, so it should be, you know, there's all those math ones, and you can I just kind of go in and jiggle it around and figure it out, and it works. This is another fun story. I did, so we've kind of been pushing people off because we got in, we saw Smart Forms in the beta release, and so we were part of beta Smart Forms as a customer, and we knew we were going to do it, so we've kind of been waiting for the RTM release of Smart Forms and all that stuff. And so HR had a stack of stuff that they wanted. And the problem with a lot of their stuff is anything that has to do with money, we keep in software called Deltek, and it's got an Oracle backend. So HR, of course, knows all the employee data we want, because if they're an employee, they're getting a paycheck, they know who's active, they know who's not. So basically what they wanted was us in real time to go into the Oracle database, pull employee data, grab some from over here, put it together, and populate these forms, and then process it along and have it all be, I mean, it was like, no kidding around, a full-blown application. They had shopped around and found somebody who does it off-the-shelf for them, and we kind of said, no, don't do that, we'll get to it, we promise. So I had the treat of, I took 6 paper forms, put them all together, built it in Smart Forms. I ran about 3 hours per paper form, and that's with form. Come find me after, I'll show them to you. They're beautiful. The guy I sit in the office with, he's got a dual degree in computer science and art. So I'm not kidding. So our stuff has to be pretty for him to be happy. So our forms look beautiful, which strangely enough is what most people comment on. It drives me insane. It's like, I'm pulling all this cool stuff, and it's doing this, and it's like, this is unbelievable. Do you know how hard that would be? And they're like, oh, I really like that blue. But it's what makes people happy, so our forms are pretty. But anyway, I had the rare treat of going to HR and saying, hey, you know, see these forms? And I literally said, oh, yeah, I built an application for all that stuff yesterday. It was really cool. Which they then said, like, well, no, well, we wanted to change this, and we wanted to change this, and that's the other cool thing is you can then go back in and do it, and it's not that hard. We're a ISO shop. I don't know if anybody knows what ISO is, but it's a manufacturing standardized thing. We, as part of our ISO stuff, I don't know, 8 years ago, wrote a ton of stuff in ASP.NET, and we're just one by one going in there and replacing them, and I think this is a business thing, so I imagine a lot of you too, it's the money. And what we were paying just to maintain those forms it's ridiculous how much you have to pay just to make little subtle changes. And now for me, it's like, oh yeah, I'll just drag that over in the workflow, deploy, done. It really has changed the way we have conversations about what we're going to deploy in IT and how all that stuff works. I'll tell you one more, and then I'm going to, do you want me to keep going? All right. So this is the other really cool one I'm working on, is we got tasked with building a asset tracking system for all the government purchase things. So essentially it's a $50,000 radio antenna. We want to know where it is on Tuesday at 1 o'clock when somebody says, hey, where's the $50,000 radio antenna? It's a fair enough question. So we are able to go into the purchasing system, see that it was received, in real time then pull it into SharePoint and use QRC barcodes on everything to pull up SharePoint lists. So we've literally integrated, it ties together Active Directory, our employee database in Oracle, purchasing in Oracle, and a couple SQL databases, and it just in real time pulls it all together, and you can see it on your smartphone via a SharePoint mobile site. It's really, really cool stuff. And there again, it's just all that connectivity and pulling all that different stuff together is all run by K2. So, all right, that's my shtick. Come find me if you have more questions. I'd be happy to talk about it.
So there you have it. We really like it when customers jiggle and jaggle our stuff, and it just works. You know, so thanks, Brian. We're going to go over to Q&A. I think to wrap it up, we appreciate you being here. It was really exciting for us when we have customers who call us up and says, we've been so successful with your software, and we know that's not always the case. But when we have customers that have been so successful with our software that they want to talk about it, and they want to come out and tell people about what they can do for their own organizations, ranging from OEM businesses that affects the modern devices that we carry in our pockets today, to devices that you buy in retail stores, all the way through to high-tech technology that the government use. It really is a fantastic opportunity for us to allow people to affect change that bubbles up all the way through to the very highest levels within those organizations. We wanted to share some of those stories with you this morning. We hope you enjoyed what you see with the SharePoint 2013 integration. That stuff is available from this morning at our booth. We're also going to open up the beta registrations. If you're interested in participating in the beta down the line, that's opening up. So if you want all of that detail, please come to the booth. You can get it there. If you've already registered, we'll send you that information. I'm going to open up for Q&A quickly and see if there are any questions that we can answer. And then I'm going to hand over to DC to wrap it up for us. So I think there's a microphone here in the middle, which I think we need to use for the audio recordings for Q&A. So if you don't mind, if you have a question, just moving to the middle here. Is that... Yes.
My question is whether you have any kind of support for digital signatures or the workflow, so that, for example, I have a couple government customers who are pretty strict about getting everything on the page. They need every step, for example, in the workflow to have auditing record, which is signed by the person who approved the actual event. Yeah. So the question is whether you have, what extent.
So digital signatures, we actually do. We support it on a number of different levels. We have some inherent capabilities, and with the new PDF stuff as well to do that. And then all the way through up to partnering with some of the big vendors out there. DocuSign, as an example, is a company that we partner with. Some customers extend their solutions into that realm, and we provide very nice integration into DocuSign, as an example, where you can use their digital authentication, digital signature technology embedded within K2 processes and K2 forms. And it's very cool to see all that stuff working together. We have people here. Dave Marcus can actually talk to you about those solutions, and he can give you all the detail that you need on that. So Dave is around here somewhere in the room. There, Dave's over there. Another question?
Yeah, I think I know the answer already, but is the new version, is it still using Silverlight for the view status and the task list?
Yeah, so the task list is actually changing away. That's all HTML. The designer is still Silverlight, and the view flow is the first one that will move to HTML5, and then the designer will follow. But the very first version of the solution that will ship for 2013 will still use Silverlight on the design time experience. None of it on the runtime.
Okay, thank you.
What does the deployment model look like to move forms from dev to test to UAT and then to prod?
It's a good question. So we have a component called package and deployment. It's actually brand new. It's not just specific to forms. You can point it to any K2 process or solution that includes forms, and will actually accumulate all the artifacts that makes up that solution, as well as all the dependency items that you have. For those of you familiar with K2, all the way down to your service object layers and service objects. and package that into a single file, which you can move around into any of your other environments and go and deploy without having the full K2 suite installed on that environment. So in other words, the design tools and the development tools. And again, we can talk to you about P&D. It will ship in RTM format. There's a version of that available today, but the new version will ship with what you saw today early next year.
Couple of questions. First, how does the permissions work? Does it honor the SharePoint permissions because it is already probably linked within the list? Another question was, you have a manager where you do set up an approval. Can you set up a proxy?
It's a good question. So a couple of questions. First one was on security. Do we honor security? We do, because of the smart object layer that sits there. We now support with this we support OAuth as well as our own SSO store. So for systems that doesn't support OAuth, you can actually use OAuth with SharePoint 2013. And what will happen is the moment that you access information in SharePoint, it will say, I need your credentials, and we'll use OAuth to validate you, get the token, come back, and the information that you see and the rights that you have within SharePoint is the rights that is assigned by SharePoint to you. It's not K2. So we use OAuth as the standard. It's the standard out there. Pretty much all the systems today moving and migrating to OAuth and fully supported within K2 on the form side as well as in the workflow side. So the workflow can do things on your behalf against that environment using OAuth. So we thought about it all the way through. And the second question was proxy. Yes, you can. Yeah, you can have proxies. You can have delegations. So I can delegate work to someone else. You saw the action items that Will have mentioned, approve, reject. I mean, those are generic lists. When I delegate work, I can delegate work and say, when I delegate it, I only give you the right to do rejections and not approvals. So that proxy setup can actually be quite involved. And it's quite a powerful framework within K2 to do that. And especially when you get into sort of real-world environments, the way people work, it really helps you to deal with ad hoc environments and ad hoc scenarios.
I have two workflow questions for you. So currently in SharePoint 2010, there's no way to do loops in workflows. Do you guys have something that does loops?
Yeah, we do. We've always had it, and there's been some enhancements in SharePoint 2013. But loops are much more than just sort of looping around a block of items. I mean, it's been part of our native DNA. It's there. It's actually a lot more than just saying simply yes, we do loops. I mean, one of our guys can spend time with you at the booth and take you through what you can do and how powerful that can be. And the ability to actually loop to any point in the process previously is all natively part of the software.
Okay. And the second question is, I saw that you have attachments. You can attach PDF files. Is there a possibility to attach calendar attachments or calendar invitations? Any
item that can either be a reference in another system, so Exchange is an example, items you can attach from Exchange, or any binary item. So a .ics file, I mean, from a technical point of view, can attach to K2, pretty much anything, media, HTML5, forms can render HTML5 videos, anything that you can attach or associate with the workflow you can drive into a K2 process. There's one thing that I do want to point out. We do prefer a model to not copy a lot of data into the process engine because you end up with stuff that gets very heavy. I mean, you have 10, 20, 30 meg files these days is not uncommon. So we like to use Smart Object to reference to the item, keep it where it is, let the system that contains it protects it and secure it. But if you really want to, you can actually attach it the same way that you would attach an email into a process. Or you can use some of the new systems, Box.net or Dropbox or SkyDrive to accomplish the same thing. All integrated into K2 as well. Any other questions? One more?
I'm sure the answer is yes, but multiple branching,
yes.
A single event triggers off multiple workflows.
Yeah. It's all part of what we do now. That's where we came from. So, any other questions before I hand over to Dave Constantine? Let me give you a bit of background on what Dave's going to do here. We had an option at K2 to hold a big party. We decided not to do that. We thought, let's take that money, go and buy some hardware and give it to people that support us, our customers and partners out there. So that's what Dave's going to do. Unfortunately, we only bought 20 of those, but we want to hand it out to you rather than just having another party. There's a lot of those going on this week, and we thought it's a unique way to saying thank you to the people that support us and to the community that's been driving K2. So that's what Dave's going to do from my side. Thank you for this morning. Thank you for coming.